So I please also ask you to my audience to give a warm welcome to Eric Solheim, that is the executive director of the UN Environment, and also to Sadhguru, our mystic and visionary founder of Isha Foundation. Please welcome stage with me.
Thank you. Where should I sit? That's it.
Good afternoon. Good to see such a big audience. I'm here with a man who has inspired millions of Indians to work for the environment and particularly to clean up and save the fantastic, beautiful big rivers of India. So I think we will explore a little bit what inspires you and then how you're able to inspire others, and then later we'll move on to maybe the more practical issues regarding how you can achieve such a big movement in India. But let me start with this very simple question. I mean, I read your biography. You're coming from Mysore. For those of you who are not familiar with India, that's a city in Karnataka state in southern India. I've been there once, and it's the overwhelming impression when you get there is Shiva's bull. There's a Shiva, of course, is the god, and every god in Hinduism has a vehicle, and Shiva has the bull. And that's what you see when you remember from Mysore. But later you have moved on to Tamil Nadu, to the city of Coimbatore in Tamil Nadu. All this is southern India. But let's start there. I mean, how you have been inspired to start working for the environment?
Namaskaram. Good afternoon to everyone. My engagement with rivers and forests of southern India started very early for me. When I was 8–9 years of age, if I got enough money to buy food for 3 to 4 days, I just managed this and disappeared into the jungles by myself. Well, it was a big concern for those who bore me, but
Your mother liked it, or?
I just lived in the jungles, and when I was there, I did not experience this as some kind of nature or natural beauty. I just saw it as a life larger than myself. And when I was 17, I floated down Kaveri River for 163 kilometers for 13 days, eating off the river, living off the river, just on 4 truck tubes and a few bamboos. And the river is a life beyond you and me. People like you and me come and go, but these rivers have been flowing for millions of years and they must flow forever. But such a mighty life, we've brought it down to its knees today. The rivers that I saw at that time, 50 years ago, and the rivers that I see today are just half of what they used to be. They say average depletion is around 44%. But many rivers are well below half, and many of them which were perennial for millions of years have become seasonal rivers. This year, Kaveri did not touch the ocean for 3.5 months. It dried up 170 kilometers inland. The entire length of Kaveri in Tamil Nadu, between these two states, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, there is a big war for water. It's going on for the last 25 years. But the entire length of the river is only 430 kilometers, but it dried up 170 kilometers inland. And the sad part is when we did this painting competition across the country in over 160,000 schools, many children, when we asked them to paint a river, they just painted sand. This is the experience of the people.
And why is that? Why are they going so dry? Is agriculture? Why is it happening?
See, in India, only 4% of the river water is glacial or ice-fed. Rest is all forest-fed. Forest-fed essentially means we have rains. Unlike in Europe, we have rains for only on an average of 40 to 45 days across the country, which is our monsoon. This 45 days of precipitation, we are supposed to hold it in the land for 365 days and let it go in the river slowly. If this has to happen, substantial vegetation has to be there. There is a serious removal of vegetation, not only in the form of forests, but also in the farmlands there used to be vegetation. For example, in the Ganga basin, which amounts to 25% of India's geography and 33% of India's agricultural produce, in the last 50 years we have removed 94% of the green cover, 94%. This has happened mainly because I know this well because 45 years ago I was into farming, and at that time when the new movement came of green revolution, where we started using fertilizers for the first time, chemical fertilizers, fertilizer companies openly advised every farmer to remove all the trees because fertilizer gets absorbed by the aggressive root system of the trees and it will not produce yield for the crops. So, across the country in the last 35–40 years, a huge depletion of green cover happened. That is the main reason why waters have receded. Another thing is there is a serious exploitation of groundwater, which is an inevitable consequence of not having enough water in the rivers.
In your video you said something like people believe that water brings forest, but the opposite is more true, forest brings water.
It is so, there is substantial science today to show you that it is the tree cover which attracts rain. And right now, we see that wherever the rains happen in India, the monsoon is becoming so scattered, though the same volume of water is coming down in principle. In the last 100 years, there's not been too much variation in the amount of water or the precipitation coming down on the Indian subcontinent. But where it is coming down, in what patterns it is coming down has completely altered, mainly because of lack of green cover. And today there is no more debate about it, everybody knows that it's the forests which draw water or rain.
But you have a background touring the water or going down the river more or less like Mark Twain did at the Mississippi 100 years before. You have seen the rivers depleting. But then you set yourself the target, how can we mobilize people to be engaged with this? What was your thinking?
See, in the year 1998, certain UN agencies came and made a prediction that in the southernmost state of India, which is the Tamil Nadu, they made a prediction in the next 25 years, that is by 2025, 60% of Tamil Nadu will go through desertification. Well, I don't like predictions of any kind, whether it's about individual life or about the nation or about the world. So I went about looking for myself. I traveled around Tamil Nadu just to see if this is true. Then I found that it will not go till 2025, it will happen much sooner. So I started planting trees in people's minds for 6 years. That's a very tough terrain. Once that was done, we started transplanting on the land. So we've planted about over 32 million trees. It has changed the landscape of Tamil Nadu. It has increased the green cover by 7.2%. And above all, it has set forth a huge awareness in the population. We have over 3,000 green schools today, that is, if a school plants over 10,000 trees, they're certified as green schools, so children are getting into it big time. Culturally, there is a lot of awareness about it. And we brought about this thing about children can have trees as pets, which is caught on very well in many states today. All this happened, but one thing I realized was individually whatever we do, as organizations whatever we do, is not enough. We need a government policy, we need a long-term policy which will determine how we use our natural resources, particularly rivers and forests and soil. These three things, how this should be managed. So we are looking at how to make the soil and water, particularly rivers and forests, as a national treasure, not as something that everybody can use whichever way they want. As a part of this, it has been in my mind for last 25 years, I've been watching that rivers have been depleting, but particularly in the last 7 years, I'm not able to tell you exactly why, but in the last 7 years, the depletion is so steep that I've been watching this with great distress, how it is depleting, at the rate at which it is depleting. In another 15 years' time, I believe, and many studies today are beginning to say this, that most rivers in India, at least 60% of the rivers in India will become seasonal, not perennial rivers. So, when we started this project Green Hands to plant trees, I made a simple process that because this is a spiritual movement, we had large following. Because this is a very eclectic group of people, non-religious spiritual movement, handling spiritual process as a science, as a technology for your well-being. So I started this movement, making people breathe with the trees and make them experientially see that what you exhale, the trees are inhaling, and what the trees are exhaling, you're inhaling. So literally 1/2 of your breathing apparatus are hanging out there on the trees. Once we made people experience this, now I can't stop them from planting trees. Everybody's just going wild. Wherever they can, they're planting trees and everybody wants to plant trees. So many movements, hundreds of movements have started across Tamil Nadu, many organizations. And when we set up a Guinness record of planting the maximum number of trees in a day, I saw such a healthy this thing happening that at least another 20 to 27 organizations desperately trying to break that record. I thought that's really great that such things began to happen. So the Rally for Rivers itself is something that we envisioned and set it forth, and there were lots of skepticism everywhere, and people said you can never put this… Because in India, rivers are a concurrent subject between the central or the federal government and the state governments. States are ruled by various different political parties, they never come together. When I went to one of the states, the chief minister who was there, who happened to be a federal minister at one time in another government, he said, "Sadhguru, we came up with a similar policy about 24 years ago, but we just could not get concurrence from the states. But this time around, all political parties spoke in one voice, because last 6-7 years I've been clandestinely working to get their, for them to build some trust with me, that when I unrolled the rally, every one of them came up and shared… Normally these opposition parties will never sit together on dais. They sat together, they spoke in one voice, which is a tremendous concurrence. This concurrence was one big stumbling block which we crossed quite effortlessly, and 162 million people participated in the rally, which is the largest ever for any movement.
What confuses me a little bit, I've been a lot to India, but of course I'm not an Indian. I mean, you speak like a politician, like a political organizer, but you look like an Indian holy man. How do you combine these two?
I think I'm just speaking like a responsible human being,
Okay.
not as a politician or a holy man or an unholy man. The problem is just this, that people have taken identities like this. Somebody is an environmentalist, somebody is a politician, somebody is a spiritual person. I feel what we need is inclusive human beings, that every one of us will do whatever within our capability, whatever is possible we will do for the well-being of all life around us. And I think that's just what I'm doing, and that's just what I've inspired people to do. And only because people recognized that I don't belong to any group or any party or any kind of segregation, that's why the entire India responded the way it responded.
But are your thinking rooted in religion, meaning traditional Hindu practice, Shivaism, or is it rooted in the practice you mentioned of yoga, which is of course a practice which is secular but still related to traditional Indian thinking? I mean, how will you describe your relationship to Indian traditional thinking and religion?
See, for me, when people refer to me as a Sadhguru, what they're saying is that I'm an uneducated guru. Because Sadhguru is not a title, it's a description. Like if you want to go to your doctor, if you have a dental problem, you go to a dentist. If you have some problem with your bone, you go to the orthopedic, you don't go to the wrong person. So when you say a Sadhguru, it's a description that he does not know any scriptures, he does not know any religion, he does not know any dogma or ritual. There's only one thing he knows. He knows this piece of life absolutely from its origin to its ultimate. Because I know this piece of life, and that's the only thing I know, by inference I seem to know everything else around me because for every human being, you know only what you experience, rest you don't know, it's just imagination. What else do we know, tell me? What you hear, what you smell, what you taste, what you touch, this is the only way you know life. So if you know this piece of life in its absolute nature, by inference you know almost everything that's worth knowing.
When we discussed before you came here, you made a point which is very close to my heart for sure, and that is that environmentalists need to get out of the group of the very converted, sometimes a little bit on the fringe of politics, and into the mainstream to mobilize, not in the thousands, but in the case of India, in the millions and in the tens of millions. So how did you manage that?
So when you utter the word environmentalist, I don't know how it's understood in many other parts of the world, but in India, an environmentalist means somebody who will protest against something. They're always against somebody or something. An environmentalist means he must be the most inclusive person possible, but they're always exclusive. Sometimes I wonder if it's just their livelihood, because they don't come to any solutions. They only know how to point out problems and make bigger problems out of it. What I see is, without engaging the governments of the day, you are not going to come to any solution. You're only going to talk about the problem. And above all, in a country like India, where the population pressure on the land is so heavy, if you do not talk about people's well-being, you can as well forget about environmental movements of any kind. It's very important. Environmental movement presents our concerns in a way that it's beneficial for the people, that they must understand by engaging with it, they will benefit in some way because they're just fighting for their survival. You can't tell them to go save the planet, it's not going to work. So this is the fundamental difference that I try to bring about. And just now I was talking to one of your colleagues there, and the main thing is, the policy document when I gave, I insisted with the Prime Minister that it should not go to the Environment Ministry. Because if it goes to the Environment Ministry, it just becomes one more file there. There are lots of files out there saying great things which never happen. I said this must go to the Economic Advisor, and fortunately it went to the Economic Advisor and to the Planning Commission, which is today called as Niti Aayog. Niti Aayog has been appointed as the nodal agency to handle this policy, which is an extremely positive step. This means there's going to be action on the ground. And this is because of this that now 8 states have signed MOUs with us, totally amounting to, what is 200 crores? I'm sorry. 200 crores is 2,000 million. 2,000 million trees to be planted along the riversides. We have signed agreements with 8 different states. This has happened only because it went to the Economic Advisor, not to the Environment Ministry.
I mean, historically in India, the discussion about development and environment has been framed as a contradiction. Do you want to develop, or do you want to take care of the environment?
There were moments, ape versus man movements, because people thought if you save the forest, only monkeys will live there.
Exactly. And how, I mean, also Prime Minister Modi, as I see it, has really embraced a completely different vision for India, where you integrate environment and development into the future. But how did you support that, to bring that out to the masses?
See, one important aspect of this is, I mean, when we drove the rally across the country, we spoke only about minimum 1 kilometer plantations on the riverside. The policy includes various other aspects, but for the mass movement, we focused on one-point agenda so that common people understand this easily. So one aspect of this is, Indian rivers, the major rivers, run for approximately 20,000 kilometers, which means on either side it's 40,000 square kilometers. Out of this, 25%, fortunately, happens to be in the government hands. Now we are insisting, except what they earmark for next 50 years of development plans, rest of it, no matter where it is, all government land should be forested. This is what we're shooting for. And in principle, they've agreed. In practice, it has to come forth. There are many challenges on the ground, but it has to be handled. The remaining 75% of the land is farmland. So, In this, about 6 to 7% is delta land. We don't have to touch the delta land, they're all rice bowls. You don't have to touch that, we can leave it as it is. So what we are talking about is 65% of the land, approximately 28,000 square kilometers minimum. We want to convert these lands from crop-based agriculture to tree-based agriculture. As I was telling you earlier, India is importing 43,000 crores, that is nearly $8 billion worth of timber from elsewhere. Right now the law is such that if you grow a tree on your land, you cannot cut it. So nobody will grow a tree. It is very important that what I grow on my land, I can do whatever I want with it, only then I will grow trees. Though people know it's lucrative to grow trees, they will not grow because they will not get permission to cut it. So just because environmentalists will go and say, you should not cut the tree, I have seen these things happening. Somebody in their private land, trees that they have grown, they try to cut. Some environmentalists will come and protest because that's their living. Every 2 months they have to have a site to protest somewhere. By this, we are just killing the entire tree plantations that people could do because more than 75% of the land is owned by private owners. Why will they grow anything that they cannot crop? You have to allow them to crop, and we have to benefit from the cycles of plantations and this, because ultimately, all said and done, the more wood we use rather than metal and other things, it is ecologically more sensible because it's the only thing we can grow back. We can't grow back iron ore or oil or anything. The only thing that we can grow back is trees. If we grow them in large scale and it is economically beneficial for the farmer, only then it'll happen. Another aspect is India used to have a very high level of fruit diet in its day-to-day diet, to a point where ancient travelers like Megasthenes and Yuan Sen, who came hundreds of years ago, they all noted that Indian people have a very high fruit diet in their daily consumption. But today only 4% of the diet is fruit. This 4% is largely consumed by the elite in the urban areas. The rural population, we have looked around and seen many rural children have not eaten a fruit in 30 days' time. If they eat a fruit, it's just a banana. Other than that, there is no fruit available because everything has been ripped off in the last 35, 40 years' time. So we are trying to bring fruit back into Indian diet. We are going to start a campaign once this horticultural movement takes off. Now our focus is setting up large-scale demonstrations how shifting from crop-based agriculture to tree-based agriculture can be very, very beneficial to the farmer. It can enhance his income 3 to 8 times. We were working with a group of Vietnamese, I don't know if there are any of the Vietnamese participants here, are there? Yes. Some Vietnamese experts, they came and worked with us for some time, and they said their farmers' income has gone up 20 times over, shifting from rice cultivation to fruit cultivation. I said, how is this possible? They're laughing at us, saying that we came to India 23 years ago and studied in the Indian universities. We took this knowledge and put it into land. Your people got PhDs. So we are seeing how to put this back into the land so that farmer can benefit, because Indian farmers' condition is very bad. One more thing that has made this happen, that we are going for very water-thirsty crops like rice, wheat and sugarcane mainly, because these are the only 3 crops which have minimum support price. Now in the policy we are trying to change this, that fruit should have minimum support price and there must be cold chains and value addition industry coming up. This is why we are going for large-scale modules of 50-kilometer stretches minimum we are talking about in 5 different states, where riverside or riparian lands can be made into horticultural lands with all the needed support system so that it becomes an economic success. Once it becomes an economic success, there is no stopping it.
It's interesting you bring up Vietnam, because Vietnam is probably the biggest global success of any nation when it comes to the transformation of its agriculture. It has gone from being the biggest rice importer in the world to the second biggest rice exporter in the world, and as you say, also diversify crops in a fantastic, impressive way. But I'm really interested in how do you communicate with people? I mean, you have been able to speak to people who…
You already said I'm like a politician.
Yeah, but politicians, maybe some Indian politicians like Prime Minister Modi, but politicians have difficulties often really appealing to people. I mean, let's face it, many of the people you want to reach out to and have reached out to, their daily life is to how to get enough chapati for my family tomorrow, what to eat tomorrow, how to get chapati or rice, how can I just sustain my life, and how do you then frame a language, a message, which get people to really do something, to plant tree or support your movement, how to engage with people?
See, I feel in every nation, I'm sure there are many committed people here wanting to do things in their countries. It's very important that there is a certain trust with the people. When I say trust, the environmentalists themselves may not be able to generate that trust because they may be scientists, they may be knowledgeable, but they don't know how to connect with the people. So they have to use those people who already have a connection with the people and who are not vested interests. So, one thing is, this has not just happened out of the blue, this Rally for Rivers. This 160 million people coming and supporting this is not simply an accident. It is something that we built in the last 35 years of work. We built this trust with people. When I spoke to one very important politician and he was praising me, I said, see, I will never speak for you, do you understand that? Maybe you're wasting your words of praise on me because I'm not going to ever speak for you. So he said something very fantastic which really moved me. He said, Sadhguru, I have my politics, other people have their politics, we all do whatever we do. But in this country, we need at least one voice which speaks the truth. I want your voice to be that voice. I said, this is too mature for a politician. I bowed down to him, I said, this is too great, this is too fantastic. So, to become that voice which is trusted, to become that voice which people know is not a vested interest, is most important. So I would say, in your countries and in your societies, whoever is that voice, you must pick out that person and make sure that person speaks. It could be a sports star, it could be a film star, it could be a spiritual leader, it doesn't matter who they are, but it's a trusted voice, only then we can move the people. It's not just going to happen because you say environment, because environment is too complex an issue for common people to understand. As you said, they're interested in how to make their next meal, they're not really interested in how to save the world tomorrow.
What a vote of confidence.
Huh?
What a vote of confidence from this politician who said we want one person to speak the truth.
I'm sorry?
That's such a vote of confidence.
Isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Isn't that wonderful?
But you also said that, I mean, up to this point, of course, because of the enormous decline in tree cover in India, many states or maybe the federal government has made regulations to prohibit tree cutting with the best of intentions to stop
Yes.
it. Then comes you and say, no, that doesn't work.
See, that's the whole thing. See, right now, for example, this is something I just handed over the letter to the Prime Minister's office just 2 days ago. See, individual farmer is not taxed for his income in India. Farm produce is not taxed. But if the farmers get together and farmers producers organization, these are called FPOs in India, which we are trying to promote now. If you form an FPO, then the FPO gets taxed. So we are making sure scale never happens. Right now the average land holding in India, because of these thousands of years of farming and, bifurcation of lands, is about 1 hectare, 2.25 acres, you can't invest anything. If you invest something, it will just sink you down so badly. I just met a farmer a month ago, in Tamil Nadu itself, 27-year-old young farmer. He's got 3.5 acres. I asked him, what is your water source? He says he has sunk 9 bore wells. 9 bore wells means it's over 1 crore rupees. 1 crore rupees, what, somebody dollars, euros?
10 million. 10 million.
Really?
10 million.
10 million rupees, all right. which is nearly million and a half dollars. He spent that much on 3.5 acres. There is no way, it doesn't matter what he grows, there is no way he will ever recover that money. He has to either sell the land, run away or hang from a tree. This is what is happening. Because the largest investment in agriculture is in irrigation. So one thing we are trying to change is to bring farmers together to a minimum of 10,000 acres, kind of farmers-producers organizations, and outsource irrigation through corporates. For this, we are working on legal structures so that farmers' land is 100% safe. The moment you ask somebody to invest on farmland, first question and fear that comes up is they're going to take away your land one day. So we want to establish a legal structure which we are working on right now to see that farmers' land is 100% protected. At the same time, the corporate which invests in irrigation also has protection for its investment for a substantial period of time. So how to do this legally and legislatively is what we are working at, because without scaling up, investment is just going waste. Each farmer has a connection, each farmer has a bore well, each farmer has a pump. It is such a waste of everything, and above all, farmers do not know how to manage micro-irrigation. I have seen this in our own yoga center. We put micro-irrigation. Somebody comes and digs it up tomorrow morning. You ask them what happened, they said, no, we were digging, just it got cut by itself. They will tell me stories, and after 2 years it is all piled up in one heap and it's not working. Unless corporations get into it, micro-irrigation will not work. Right now, 85% of India's water consumption is agriculture. This can be reduced to at least 30% if we go in for micro-irrigation in a big way. And this is only possible if organized sector comes into it. For this land protection, the safety of the farmer's land must be ascertained with proper legal structures in an enforceable manner. This is a key element that we are working at. And right now, about the effluent treatment, as I was telling you, one big problem with India is we are asking the polluting industries to treat their effluent. They treat it during the day, in the night they just let it out into the river. This is what is happening. Now we are trying to bring the government to this because already so much investments have been made, but these investments are not working because obviously rivers are polluted, that means they're not working. We want to make treatment industry a completely separate industry. Polluting industry should never treat the water. Another business should treat the water. When your effluent is my business, I'm not going to let it go into the river. I'm going to make sure it comes to me. And above all, more than going into the river, it is very important. Right now, this is very unplanned agriculture. There is a city here, but vegetables are growing 1,000 kilometers away. Fruits are growing somewhere in another part of the country. Being a tropical nation, we can grow almost everything in most parts of the country. And for example, Mumbai produces 4 billion liters of effluent per day, okay? 4 billion liters of effluent per day. If you treat this water and use this with micro-irrigation, what you can grow in terms of crops is phenomenal. But that water is not made use of, it's just let out into the rivers or into the oceans. So the policy document is working towards it, how to transform filth into wealth. Because without economic sense, we are trying to talk ecology, it's not going to work. We have to present ecology as the most sensible thing to do. Economically, it's the most sensible thing to do. Commercially, it's the most profitable thing to do. That is how we are trying to present the draft.
We are coming to the end. I mean, you have told us a story on how you have inspired millions of people in India to act on the environment, how you on tree planting, how you was involved in this, how you merged environment into well-being so that you can appeal to a lot of people. But here is an audience of people from all corners of the world. I mean, from Mexico to Indonesia, from Vietnam to Germany. Is this general lessons learned, and what will you tell people here? If they go out in their communities, their societies, and want to mobilize people, what's the lesson learned from India?
Say, except in nations in South America and maybe Africa, where there is enormous land, we could approach it differently. Wherever there is population pressure, what we are doing in India is a very sensible way to approach. Mexico definitely it's a sensible way to approach, Indonesia also. Where there is not much population pressure on the land, we can go in a more purist way. This is not to my liking what I'm doing, but I know if I talk very pure ecology, nobody's going to walk with me. It's very important, people have to benefit, only then they will walk with us. Right now we are looking at this, over 41,000 acres of forest land in India has less than 10% green cover. We are seeing how to put the green cover back in that. Over 300,000 square kilometers, I'm sorry, this is not acres, square kilometers of land has less than 40% green cover in the forests. How to put this back? If we do just this, which can be easily done because this is under government control, the land, but people are using it for grazing and other things. So we are trying to bring a policy change where what is adjoining villages, we will use the local people to do the plantations in the forest, but they can take forest produce. They cannot cut down the tree, but they can take forest produce, they can use the foliage as a supplement for their cattle and stuff, they can use other kinds of forest products, there are small berries and other things which they can take. Only thing is they cannot cut the trees. If you allow this economic advantage, they will participate. Otherwise, if you try to just protect it, it is thousands of kilometers of land to be protected, it's never going to happen. People will find their way, there is corruption in the forest department, people will somehow access it and do all the negative things. It is important that the new forests that we develop are the rejuvenated forests adjacent to the villages. Villages have an access to it and a responsibility towards it. This has to be established, otherwise we will not succeed, because we've been talking about it for 5 decades now and nothing happened. I don't know how long to wait. I'm not willing to wait. I want to make sure that something begins to happen on the ground. This can only happen if we show them that it's advantageous to them to protect the forest.
Thank you so much. I mean, to me, you are the incarnation of the Sustainable Development Goals, because while there are 17 of them, they're all at the end about these two, people and planet, uplift the people and protect the planet, and that's your mission. So thank you so much, people and planet.
Thank you very much. This is the river revitalization policy document presented to the Indian government. We are giving a copy to you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
We look forward to making this happen.
Let's go so we can… I want to make photos. Okay, thank you so much.
So let me thank again our special guests of today for the interesting conversation they just had. And I will lead you into the second part of our afternoon/evening together. This is going to be I want to introduce you the video address from Jacques Attali, French economy and social theorist, writer, political advisor, and also senior civil servant. Please.
Mesdames, Messieurs, je suis désolé de ne pas être avec vous. En réalité, je suis là de façon virtuelle pour vous dire mon admiration pour le travail que vous accomplissez depuis longues années et pour vous dire l'importance que nous attendons tous à vos travaux et à ce qui va suivre dans cette conférence. La forêt est non seulement essentielle parce que c'est la beauté des paysages, non seulement essentielle parce qu'elle est importante pour le climat, et plus que jamais nous avons besoin de la forêt pour absorber les gaz à effet de serre et améliorer la situation de l'environnement, mais aussi parce qu'elle est une métaphore parfaite de ce qui est important de faire en général, c'est-à-dire de se préoccuper des générations futures, de planter pour eux des arbres dont on ne verra pas la taille adulte, et de prendre conscience que nous avons un devoir de gratitude à l'égard de ceux qui ont planté il y a 2 siècles, 3 siècles, 1 siècle, 50 ans, des arbres. dont nous bénéficions aujourd'hui parce qu'ils sont là. Il ne faut jamais oublier, quand on voit un arbre, c'est qu'il y a quelqu'un qui l'a planté il y a 30 ans ou il y a un siècle. De même, si nous avons aujourd'hui des enfants qui sont bien formés, c'est parce qu'il y a eu des professeurs qui ont été bien formés il y a 50 ans. Et cette chaîne qu'on voit dans la nature se voit aussi dans l'humanité, et la forêt en est un exemple. Protéger les forêts, c'est protéger l'homme, c'est protéger les forêts. Nous sommes dans une symbiose, nous parlons aux arbres, les arbres nous parlent, et cette symbiose est vraiment essentielle à l'avenir des civilisations dont la forêt fait partie. Merci pour votre travail et à bientôt.
I hope you're all still fresh and ready. Now we're going to have a panel session with the beautiful Ania Madaliska from Agrofloresta Mesoamericana and the follow-up panelists that she will introduce for you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hello, my name is Ania Madalinska. Welcome to our session on landscapes in the Americas. I represent Agrofloresta Mesoamericana, and I'm here because of the Youth in Landscapes movement. I'm honored to be here today with a panel of distinguished speakers who represent really a wealth of experience from different sectors of the environmental movement in Latin America. Among the speakers, we really have speakers from very different sectors. We have speakers who are the boots on the ground, the ones who are in the action, and also those who are the ones that shape both the national and international policy on environmental objectives. Latin American landscapes are rich and they're diverse, but they're also fragile. 6 of the 36 designated biodiversity hotspots of the world are in Latin America. Meanwhile, Latin America also hosts 25% of the world's degraded landscapes. But today, we have a panel of distinguished speakers who can help explain to us the complexity of these landscapes. To speak to us about these challenges, today with us, we have the Honorable Minister of the Environment and Natural Resources, Minister Lina Paul. She's the Minister of Environment and Natural Resources of El Salvador. Minister Paul has been a champion of land restoration in her country, and she has also established a number of mechanisms for international collaboration on conservation in Latin America. Also with us, we have Marcos Terena. Marcos Terena is a leader of the indigenous movement whose career has really has elevated the voice of indigenous peoples throughout the Americas. He was the founder of the United Indigenous Nations, the first ever organization of indigenous peoples in Brazil. And throughout his career, he has been dedicated to promoting the voice of indigenous peoples to the forefront. Former President of Mexico, Felipe Calderón, joins us today as the chair of the commission, of the Global Commission of economy and climate, also known as the new economy. Under his presidency, he presided over a very successful conference, International Climate Conference in Cancun, where he brought recognition to Mexico as an important player in the fight against climate change. Also from Brazil, we have with us Maria Margarita da Silva. Mrs. Maria Margarita Ribeiro da Silva. Ms. Ribeiro is a grassroots leader who represents one of the largest extractivist reserves in Brazil. She has been fighting for decades to support local communities to achieve sustainable use of their forest landscapes and their forest resources. So I'd like to welcome all our panelists, and thank you very much for joining us. Okay, so to start off today's discussion, I would like to hear your thoughts on a point of pride in Latin America. And that point of pride is that the Americas are often characterized as as having very well-developed and very active civil societies and very well-established and strong environmental movements. So, I would like to ask you, what does it take to build social movements rooted in the landscapes approach, and what does it take to generate the political commitment to support these movements? I would like to start this discussion, please, with Mr. Marcos Terena, but also our panelists are welcome to pose questions amongst themselves and respond to each other's responses.
Hola, hola. ¿Escucha? Buena tarde.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. They don't answer. If there's no communication, can you hear me? This is the beginning of what we've done these days here, communication. And the question, what can we do to improve maybe not Mother Earth, but the life quality of you all and of my people too? And the person who came from India said many things very different to what we have in Brazil. In Brazil, they call us Indians, and United Nations, those who come from India call indigenous people. So where's the difference? The difference is that we are different. We are very different. I was looking at this picture. I don't know where it has been taken, but it's a habitat of that village that you can see there. I don't know what language they speak, German, Spanish, Italian, but the strength of Mother Earth that I see in Brazil, I can also see it here. Water, trees, nature. Therefore, to have such a discussion in 2 or 3 days, it's very important to attract the attention of people, to exchange ideas, proposals, and especially something that he said, money. We talk about money, trees, water. My concern and the concern of my people in Brazil is that in the future, water for the big countries will be a problem of money. Those who will have the money might be able to drink water. And then who will be the owner of the water? that's the big question that we are observing us indigenous people, the war for water. And if we start here to promote, to exchange ideas, I think we'll be able to step forward, not towards negotiation, but for the reciprocity of our goods. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marcos Terena. Would you like to add to this, Honorable Minister Lena Paul?
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me and for allowing us to participate in this conversation. As Sadhguru was saying, the most difficult thing is to plant a tree in the mind of people is the less fertile land. Environmentalists 20 years ago were seen as mad people, a little bit fatalistic, and with the climate change, not only the environment degradation, but with climate change, with human victims, and not only, but also with economic losses, recurrent economic losses, there we were taken a little bit more seriously. And I think that the environment movement became stronger and stronger. There were not only environment issues, but social, economic, fiscal issues in many of these economies. I will not only ask for the recording of Sadhguru, but I will play it in my country. This is fundamental. If you see a problem with the tree cutting, don't go to the environment ministry, but to the economy ministry. I think that is fundamental. The environmental issue is not limited it's not limited like in the past. It's not an issue related to environmentalists or the environment ministry, but it's something that we have to do. Those who cause the problem, we do not conceive an economy based on environment. The big buyers in the world are asking to include environmental issues. Bacardi, this is the way I drink rum Bacardi every day for environmental reasons. But Bacardi said, I'm not going to buy sugar in 2020 if it's not certified by Onsucro, which has very high environmental standards. So the economy is putting pressure to change behavior. The commitment is going beyond the environmental organizations, and it's arriving to those who must be committed with the landscape restoration, just to provide water for the next generations, to plant a tree in every corner of the country. That is every corner. And we need to be all committed, and the colleague has said it rightly so. We have to communicate, we have to provide data, we have to innovate, we have to use technology, but mainly we have to commit to just to adopt this land restoration approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Okay, next we'd love to hear from President Felipe Calderón.
Gracias. Bueno, me alegra estar.
I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm continue with the argument of Madam Minister. The problem that I see with deforestation and with the devastation of forest jungles is that there are common and global goods, air, water, forest, and I reproduce what Inoko said this morning, is what the economists know as the tragedy of the commons, as they are goods of everybody, nobody takes care of them and everybody destroys them. We think in the Commission, the Global Commission for Environment and Climate, it is very important to give an economic value and to internalize those profits so that we can capture the externalities, the good that they can give back. And to do so, I will go through the environmental chain, the complete environmental chain. For example, the indigenous people in Mexico who are the owners of jungles and forests must eat. And some deforestation is due to the fact that the indigenous people, as an only resource, is the forest, is just to plant 1 or 2 hectares that give a little bit less than 100 euros per year as income, and the next season he needs to plant another hectare. So we have to include the profits from those forests, and for that we have to pay for the profit of those trees, and we have to pay for environmental systems or ecosystem services.
Money in order to pay that, or even those companies. The guru was talking a few minutes ago about the companies polluting the rivers, so those companies must pay the pollution. Whoever polluted, he must pay, with no exception. Y nos lleva al otro problema que.
And this takes us to the other problem, enforcement. We need for the authority to protect the indigenous people from attacks and to protect forests and to oblige those who pollute those who pollute water to pay for that water. And I conclude with the following. We have to find the huge economic value that we find in the landscape. And there are many examples. The forest plantation in our continent are profitable. They are a real business. They have a net positive value. And what we have to avoid, we need those plantations that and to recover those degraded forests. We need to break the long-term problems, and for that we need long-term financials. So the banks, the development banks and the governments can play an important role. The money of the financial institutions, international financial institutions, must be there to reduce risk. And thirdly, the scale. The fact that farmers have got less than 1 hectare in Mexico and India and other countries means that they can't scale. And the work of the development banks should be to try to help and to bundle producers.
Get from sustainable production, either in forests or plantation, or something like that. La tasa de retorno, the rate of return en una plantación de teca.
The return tax is very high for some timber. So those plantations with those lands that have been abandoned in the Yucatan province due to decades of crops that are not given the yield, well, we need to break the cycle. We need to respect the communities, their organization, their cultural learning. Thank you.
Thank you for those thoughts, and thank you for that common thread that came out of all of your responses and the need to incorporate economic incentives into some of the solutions that we provide in landscapes. I'd like to come back to that, but before, I'd like to finish off the first question with our speaker, Maria Margarita, Ms. Ribeiro. if you could please tell us a little bit of your thoughts on how, what is necessary in order to truly achieve political commitments towards landscape approaches, and what is critical to mobilize political commitments and to generate collective action to upscale these landscape approach solutions or sustainable solutions on the ground.
Boa tarde a todos e a todas.
Good afternoon to everybody.
O compromisso político se dá a partir da demanda, da necessidade das comunidades.
The political commitment is achieved as a result of the community's demands and needs.
O nosso exemplo, lá na Reserva Verde para Sempre, foi o conflito agrário, a invasão de madeireiro nas comunidades, que isso nos levou a demandar a regularização fundiária, solicitar do governo a regularização fundiária coletiva.
In our example, we experienced land conflicts, and we suffered from the invasion of legal loggers in our municipality, in our reserve, and we had to request a formal recognition.
Sim, aí nós solicitamos do governo o decreto, a construção da unidade de conservação.
Okay. So we requested the legal recognition of land rights from the preservation decree. Yeah, they made this request to the government, and they request the creation of a decree, the issue of a decree to guarantee the creation of the conservation unity.
Depois de solicitado, através das audiências públicas, em 2004 ele concedeu o decreto da Reserva Extrativista Verde para Sempre.
After making the request for the federal government, finally they approved the creation of the reserve in our municipality.
Em 2006, nós apresentamos a primeira proposta de plano de manejo comunitário.
In 2006, we presented the first proposal of the forest management plan.
Em seguida, com o nosso esforço, nós tivemos que construir uma instrução normativa que pudesse estar norteando essa proposta que a gente tem, uma vez que não tinha nenhuma lei que assegurasse.
Later,
com a nossa experiência, foi transformado em legislação nacional que instrui a atividade do manejo florestal comunitário em área protegida.
Okay. In our experience, the request was transformed in a legislation that attends the forest management plan.
Em seguida, foi convidada para participar das propostas da criação do Fundo Amazônia, com o motivo de assegurar que as iniciativas comunitárias possam receber apoio do fundo.
Later, I was asked to participate in the creation of the Amazon Fund with the aim of ensuring that the community initiatives could receive the support provided by the fund.
Fui também convidada para participar da reformulação do Código Florestal Brasileiro para que esse inclua um manejo florestal comunitário.
I was also asked to participate in the revision of the Brazilian Forest Code in order to guarantee the inclusion of the community forest management in the legislation.
Para criar ação coletiva a nível das comunidades é preciso ter discussão nas comunidades para fomentar a criação de organizações sociais, apoio... Discussão nas comunidades para fomentar a criação de organizações sociais.
We should ensure the discussions in our communities in order to guarantee the forest management proposal, the execution of the forest management proposal.
Apoio financeiro inicial para a execução das atividades das organizações.
Initial finance support to allow the execution of the initiatives.
Fortalecimento das organizações sociais mediante capacitação sobre técnica florestal, gestão e empreendimento.
Also to ensure the capacity building for the communities.
Thank you very much for that example of a success story of how your movement was able to be incorporated into policy making, into the policy agenda. So maybe we could go back a little bit to the discussion that came around during the first question about the importance, because I heard a common theme about the importance of incorporating these economic incentives. President Calderon has already described a little bit of the mechanisms that can help to incorporate these economic incentives. I was wondering if we could hear from the other speakers as well. For example, Minister Lena Paul, how have you, from your experience, how have you been able to do this within your land reforestation efforts?
Gracias. Bueno.
Thank you. I will tell you in 3 minutes the program of restoration from El Salvador and what it means, this incentive programs, very quickly. And it can be summarized in 3 words that Karen mentioned from the World Bank. 3 things: information, innovation, and incentives. The 3 I's. It was extraordinary. Information, this is the first thing. We need information before the incentives. We need to know what there is in the country and what are the restoration opportunities. Therefore, we built a map of land use updated with a very high resolution. We use a certain technology that allowed us 1 to 1,000 resolution. So you can see everything in these satellite images, and then I will not tell you what I saw and the reason why I'm divorced today. I'm not going to tell you the sin I saw. So you have a land map with a very high resolution, and then you build the transitions. And these are the current usage of land, and I need to bring restoration towards this. On top of that, we define wonderful maps to define priority areas for restoration with different criteria. Where do I want biodiversity, water, timber, climate? Where do I want to reduce risks? Because of floodings, for example. So we had some restoration maps, and on top of it, we define costs, how much it costs, and not only at an economic level, but also at a financial level, the restorations or the viable or profitable transitions. So we defined the restoration techniques. We included all the old knowledge, and we define not only those restoration techniques, but the most important assets of the country that needed to be preserved. drinking water plans, etc. And what are the restoration areas that would support and would stay at the basis of that healthy restoration? We innovated, we had new techniques for the whole country. To restore doesn't mean to plant a tree only. It would be easy to plant a tree, to maintain it, to work the land, etc. Therefore, we defined all those restoration techniques in an innovative way. And finally, we were left with the incentive framework. How do we do it? And I was asking the former President Calderon, how can we convince presidents that sometimes live in a fiscal crisis, almost on default, or with very high violence? How can we convince them, not only the government, but also the main economic stakeholders, banks? How do we convince them? How do I convince a bank that if you invest $1 in restoration, your yield will be $10 or $15 in economic profits? How can you communicate that? And which incentives needed to be created depending on the transition of the restoration and depending on the restoration techniques and the level of innovation? And how a small country like El Salvador, with no big forests like Brazil, Congo, or China, but with very serious problems related to climate change, and we need to adapt. And climate financing is not geared towards small countries. We're not sexy for the international cooperation or the climate cooperation. How can we do it? And we need to create those incentives. We need to mobilize the national private sector. We need to mobilize the national banks to restore, to really restore, and to restore seriously, not only planting trees, but transforming the landscape, renewing the landscape. That's the big task related to economic incentives. And I'm really sorry. Yes, the private sector is accountable for this current situation. But without the private sector, we can't do the transition, and therefore we won't be able to transform, we won't be able to restore. How can we include this sector? And this is our biggest fight, to plant tree in a land that is not so fertile, like minds and hearts, and not of politicians. Politicians are very good people, really. But those who move the world, and to make them understand that we only have one planet and these are common goods, and common goods for everybody. Thank you.
Would you like to respond to that, President Calderon?
There was a question, or yeah, I can react a little bit. Yes. Yes. No.
I absolutely agree with Madam Minister. For me, the problem was not to convince the president. I was the president. I had to convince my ministers and the members of parliament. We have a problem in democracy. I submitted a budget and a law to enhance the payments for environmental goals, and we increased we made the budget threefold. 38% was the rise in these budgets during my government. But in the parliament, I didn't have a majority, and there were members of parliament representing the agricultural sector from all the parties, and they defended their interests. So we were pushing to implement programs in order to reconcile these two aspects, because we have to deal with forestry and with agriculture. But these members of parliament were pushing against it. They were agreeing among themselves subsidies we had already annulled. So there were many perverse incentives in order to act against the market. So This is a very hard task in politics, but we have to do it. And there is no bigger strength than the strength of the citizens and of public opinion. So please do not allow any politician to act against the environment. I know there are some borderline subjects, issues, and there are subjects which are really tough, and sometimes you have to be able to compromise. But do not compromise in environmental issues. Do not accept any compromises from the politicians. We have to really build a high wall, not allowing them to go beyond that point.
Before we finish the session, I would like to move on to kind of a closing question for all of you. And that is, what are your personal commitments to ensuring what you have spoken about today, to ensuring that economic incentives are taken into consideration, that, and that civil society movements continue to have their presence in political agendas? Could you speak a little bit towards that, about what your personal commitments are, and how you intend to continue to work on those in the coming years? Could we start maybe with Mr. Terena?
Bueno, inicialmente quiero...
First of all, I would like to thank you, those who have been listening to us here all the time. And I would like to thank the organization who invited me to come from Brazil, all the way from Brazil to Bonn. And I thank all of you, all who are listening to my words here in these few minutes we have left. Anya has asked me a question, but I would like to thank Anya as well. She is an agricultural expert from Poland. I met her today. And we have already shared some ideas here in the framework of this debate, also with former President Felipe and with our Lady Minister for the Environment and our colleague from Brazil. These are very different people from different countries. Maria, she lives in the Amazon in Brazil. And I would like to thank you all and also make a few remarks since we are coming to an end. The first time I was in New York in 1991, I was there in the Summit for Indigenous People, talking about sustainability and development. The United Nations invited me to talk there, to come to New York, in order to try and organize the indigenous voice within the United Nations. And this should be an example for you. This is my personal experience as an indigenous person. I didn't have any other language, just my indigenous language. And I got to know two elements of the modern world. I got to know a train, and then also the word of the missionaries from the United States. When I was in New York, I read a sentence which made a big impression for me, for the organization of our summit. This was the statement I read. Time is money. So that's why I would like to ask you to think why you're here. What brought you here? to be here 2 or 3 days. I am always very cold. In my community, we don't use any clothing. Well, now, every now and then we use shorts because civilization told us to use clothes. Now we feel embarrassed. We are very aware of our bodies. So we were trying to articulate this indigenous thinking with 92 indigenous communities from all over the world, from Mexico, from El Salvador, from Africa, Asia, Europe, Germans, Swiss people. They were all looking forward to hearing what we had to say. So, what was the message we wanted to convey to the world? Something that could be interesting for everybody. Water, soil, and biodiversity. At that time, we called it something else. Hunger, wealth, poverty. So we went back to our wise men and asked them, what could we say? What could be the interesting statement for everybody? And they told us, we walk towards the future. And we do it, we follow the steps of our ancestors. That's very simple. What are the ancestors here in Bonn, in Germany, in Mexico, in Brazil? For me, my ancestors are my grandparents. They taught me how to live in this world. And who are your ancestors? The fight is not over. And now, to close my contribution, when I came to Bonn after traveling for a whole day from Brazil, I saw a man, very tall man, 2 meters high, the typical white man, really big, tall man, with a very elegant tie around his neck. And he told me, "Are you Terena?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And I was wondering, who is he? Before I came to Europe, I was told, please take care, there are bombs in planes, in airports, and especially the people with a lot of hair in their faces, they are very dangerous. Take care. That's what the chauffeur told me. The driver of the car warned me. He was driving a Mercedes. I think that's a German car, right? German car maker. And in Brazil, if you have a Mercedes, you are very rich. I had never been in a Mercedes before. So I was really impressed. I thought to myself, does it mean I'm a rich man now? So these issues, environment, green economy, sustainability, these are very important issues. And we have a lot of plans about these issues. But the most important thing is that you teach your children what is the currency of the future, the currency for quality of life. So I came here to tell you that there is not money enough in this world to pay for this forest, for the rivers for the rain. There is no money to buy that. The money, the currency you have to use is in your hearts. You have to use that currency. That's all. Thank you.
For reminding us that the important thing with our future commitments is to keep those objectives in mind and to keep that close to our hearts. So I'd like to thank everybody for your participation. Certainly covering landscapes of boundless riches and biodiversity, as Mr. Terena mentioned. Much is at stake in the Americas, but I'm hopeful that the experience of these panelists and the lessons they have learned can help us continue to affect positive change in the future. Thank you, everyone. Before we finish, I'd like to also ask all of you to move over to that side of the stage so we could take a photo at the request of the organizers. Thank you.
So many thanks again to our panelists for the fruitful conversation with us. Let me give you a last housekeeping of today. Please, registration tomorrow will open again at 7:30 a.m. and pavilions are open from 8 a.m. So please try to be early. I want to announce now another session, which is called Ask Me Anything with Sadhguru in the plenary hall here. I will encourage all of you to be online, to participate and to submit your question via Twitter using the hashtag AMA and hashtag AskSadhguru. Immediately after, I want to also welcome all the youth for the dinner